A healthy democratic process requires journalism. That's why the First Amendment is there.
We spent our day talking to people in the area. I talked to one woman with her child right next to her saying, hey, what are we teaching our children? Here back at campaign headquarters, we talked to people who said, look, don't judge the man by one action. But a judge will, because, of course, on June 7th, he'll have to be in court before then. So we'll have to see what happens next. I'm sure he'll face some more questions before then.
I'm sure he will, Ryan. Thank you very much for being on the ground there for us. The FBI probe into Russian election meddling is hitting close to home for President Trump. CNN has learned that investigators are now looking at the president's son-in-law and senior advisor, Jared Kushner. CNN's Joe Johns is live at the White House with that part of this story. What's the development, Joe?
Good morning, Allison. Jared Kushner has played many roles. The president's Mr. Fix-It, a member of the First Family, and now he's the first person currently inside the Trump White House to come under scrutiny, though it's not believed he's a target of the Russia investigation. President Trump's son-in-law and most trusted advisor.
He's very good at politics.
Now a focus of the FBI's investigation into Russia's meddling in the 2016 election. Officials tell CNN the Bureau is looking into a range of topics related to Kushner, a key campaign strategy, meetings held with Russian officials, and his relationship with now ousted National Security Advisor Michael Flynn. There's no indication Kushner is currently a target of the probe and no allegation of wrongdoing. Of central interest, a data analytics operation supervised by Kushner that the Trump campaign used to micro-target voters in states that were critical to the president's victory. Investigators are examining whether Russian operatives were able to piggyback on that effort with help from Trump associates, either wittingly or unwittingly, to help Russia's own alleged operation to push information online aimed at helping Trump and hurting Hillary Clinton. Kushner is also one of 4 Trump associates and the only current White House staffer under scrutiny for having contact with Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak. During the transition, Kushner met with both Kislyak and the head of a Russian bank that is currently sanctioned by the U.S. and has close ties to Vladimir Putin.
Jared did a job during the transition in the campaign where he was a conduit to leaders.
Meetings Kushner prematurely left off filed security clearance forms, omissions he rectified a day later.
The fact he met with the banker, I think he needs to explain himself.
Kushner's lawyer responding in a statement Wednesday noting that Kushner previously volunteered to share with Congress what he knows about these meetings. He will do the same if he is contacted in connection with any other inquiry. Another point of inquiry, Kushner's relationship with Flynn. According to a source, Kushner and his wife Ivanka pushed the president to hire Flynn after the election, but a source close to Kushner disputes this account. It's not clear if the FBI plans to talk to Kushner, but investigators believe he would be able to help provide information to assist the probe. The spokesman said Kushner was unaware of the FBI's interest and the Bureau hasn't contacted him. John and Allison.
Okay, Joe, thank you very much for all of that. Let's discuss it. We want to bring in our political panel. We have CNN political analyst David Gregory, CNN counterterrorism analyst Philip Mudd, and associate editor and columnist for Real Clear Politics, A.B. Stoddard. David Gregory, this is the first time that we've learned that this federal investigation doesn't just cover the campaign and Donald Trump's then campaign advisors. Now it reaches into the White House. What's the significance?
Well, just that last point, that it reaches into the White House. Jared Kushner has emerged as arguably the president's most important advisor, who is also family, whose authority goes in multiple directions, and who has business interests that raise real questions on behalf of the Trump family that could have made the campaign vulnerable to being compromised by the Russians. And again, we don't know what all the facts are, so we'll wait for an investigation. And we know through Kushner's attorney that he's happy to talk to all investigators. But I think we can make a broader point right now about the attitude of vulnerability, a kind of cavalier attitude by the Trump campaign that, well, Russia's not going to do anything to us, or there's nothing to be concerned about here. Obviously, there is, and Kushner appears to be the person who's had enough contact, had enough meetings, or knows enough to be able to really help investigators, or, though he's not a target as far as we know right now, that can always change. But he seems to be in a position to help investigators find out where some of the vulnerability was, particularly because he was responsible for a lot of the data and analytics of the campaign, which is where breaches could have occurred.
You know, Phil Mudd, we can tell by the serious look on your face that you have been involved in investigations, perhaps not quite like this, but investigations. What does it mean that they are focusing on Jared Kushner, but he's not a target, and as of now, there are no allegations of wrongdoing? And that last point that David Gregory just brought up there, the fact that now we have learned that the data operation that he ran during the campaign could be one area where they want to question.
Well, let's take two pieces of this. The first piece is, look, there's been an investigation underway since last summer. Jared Kushner obviously deeply involved with the campaign, close to the president, close to some of the people we've discussed for months, including General Flynn, and he's met with the Russians. The surprise here, John, would be if he was never of interest in the investigation. So, yes, this has come into the White House, but Kushner obviously is going to be questioned at some point by the FBI. One other quick point on why he hasn't been questioned yet. I've been questioned in investigations before. I've watched investigations. When the Bureau walks into the room, they don't want to walk in without knowing the answers. They want to know where he traveled, where his money's from, what other people at the periphery of the investigation say about his involvement, because when they walk in the door and ask him questions, half the time they're going to know the answer. He's not going to know what they know, and they want to see what he says. They want to box him. So I wouldn't expect to see him questioned early on because they're collecting a ton of data about him before they walk through the door.
AB, when I hear the term data analytics, I fall right asleep. But this is very fascinating. If you dive into what Jared Kushner was able to accomplish during the election, he was instrumental in helping President Trump win. He figured out through, I guess, social media and sales of Donald Trump merchandise, like the Make America Great caps, that there was a vulnerability in that Democrats' great blue wall and that it could crumble. And then he sent Donald Trump there to Michigan, as we know, and sure enough, it worked. So explain how it's possible there was a nexus with the Russians' data program and that they might have piggybacked on what Jared Kushner was doing.
Right. I think Jared and the team lucked into a way to use that data to realize that Wisconsin and Michigan, instead of becoming, automatically blue states on November 8th, were fertile ground for Trump by seeing the number of hats and T-shirts and things they were selling. And they decided, wow, this is a place we can target our resources and our social media campaign to try to boost Trump and depress the Hillary vote. And so in the end, it was very helpful, obviously, on the ground to the campaign, in addition to just sort of being a savvy operation. Where it comes into connection with a Russian data operation, of course, we know the Russians were doing their own, campaigns across social media to promote negative Hillary stories, positive Trump stories. But, whether or not the data analytics operation that Jared was helping run became a partner with the Russians in their data operation, willingly or unwillingly, perhaps they were hacked into, and then it's a sort of an unwilling collusion. We're yet to find that out. That sounds. It sounds, obviously like a very dramatic question, but it is the thing that would be, it makes sense in terms of the question of collusion. What was Michael Flynn doing with the Russians if people suspect him of collusion? The data operation seems to make the most sense if there's actual evidence of collusion.
Phil, just very quickly, how can you be unwittingly influenced in a data operation? We keep hearing the word unwittingly influenced by the Russians. How could that be?
Look, you're not going to walk through the front door to somebody and say, would you like to be someone who works for the Russian intelligence service? You can ask some pretty simple questions. Hey, this campaign process is really interesting. Help me understand where are the places, as AB was talking about, where Hillary Clinton might be vulnerable. And that obviously might influence the Russian campaign. So you see this countless times in the spy business. It's not just about recruiting people who know they're working for you. It's recruiting people who don't. And that's an easier path to get somebody to give you information that's important to an intelligence operation.
David Gregory, from Russia to Montana, the candidate who was caught on audio tape and by eyewitnesses assaulting a reporter, won. In that election, he is now going to Congress. What are we to make of what happened with Greg Gianforte?
Well, it didn't have an impact. Now, whether that's because voters who showed up yesterday weighed